along the ways in the different industries you've worked in?
Yeah, my career it started out in manufacturing, and I enjoy manufacturing. I love taking something from a raw material stage into a finished product.
The different things you've done over the years. I'm sure you have so many different stories, but I would love to hear like a success story from your end, like about operational strategy and growth. Like how has that changed the way you think about this, over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's such a great term that you use, right? Scorecard. So I'm hearing it for the first time. I know we have KPIs and stuff like that, but we never did it like, keep a scorecard and keep everybody on the same page. That's a perfect example. Do you have a checklist of your own that you keep when you are, reaching out to companies to understand exactly what their limitations are in terms of outsourcing, or even like generally just long-term growth with cost-cutting measures? Like, do you have anything in that?
I don't know if I have a checklist.
What is like the biggest operational blind spot that you frequently observe in these companies, that we're talking about, even with AI in place?
Yeah, there's a lot of areas. One thing I would say that I've seen is the world of business, competition makes people better.
Welcome, everyone, to the Supply Chain Management Podcast. I'm Cynthia, your host from Vserve e-Business Solutions. Here at Vserve, we know firsthand that a strong supply chain isn't just part of your business. It's the backbone, right? And Vserve has been a trusted operations partner for global businesses for the past 15 plus years. We partner with those companies who are truly looking to streamline their overall supply chain management. Whether it's ensuring inventory accuracy, perfecting order processing, or optimizing your entire backend system, we have helped midsize and enterprise brand cut costs, improve visibility, and drive fulfillment efficiencies over the years. And this podcast series is our initiative to tackle those real-world supply chain management challenges head on and also offer actionable solutions to our future leaders. We'll be bringing you conversations with leading industry experts, aiming to spark an insightful dialogue, share some practical wisdom, and ultimately empower your businesses to build a supply chain that's a bit more resilient, right, agile, and scalable for whatever the future brings us. So let's dive in and unlock the secrets to this supply chain. So welcome everyone to another Vserve e-Business Solution podcast on supply chain management. I'm Cynthia, and today we have a very special guest. He has worked in global procurement and supply chain profession for over 19 years with Fortune 500 leadership experience, right? So our guest is David Griffin. With an engineering background, he has brought transformative impact across diverse sectors like food service, hospitality, and MRO. So David, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining.
Nice to meet you, Cynthia, and thanks for having me.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would love to start at the very beginning. Where did it initially start from? How did you realize that you want to kind of specialize in this, operation and supply chain field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'll go to, maybe a little bit about me in terms of what I'm about. So I'm a pretty curious individual, and I like to figure out how things work and ultimately see if I can improve things, whether it's a process, a product, or something of that nature. And, as a kid, I was the one that took apart their toys to see how they worked. And sometimes I'd figure out if I could make them work better, but 9 times out of 10, I could put them back together and it was great. But I do that, and that led me to study engineering. And when I studied industrial engineering, I really learned that I enjoyed processes, figuring out how things worked, and then taking those skills and knowledge from school and learning that and applying it to that. And so I've done that in manufacturing, I've done it in distribution, and certainly in procurement more recently.
Wow, that's amazing. So how's your career been? Can you tell us a little bit about like how you've jumped along the ways in the different industries you've worked in?
Yeah, my career it started out in manufacturing, and I enjoy manufacturing. I love taking something from a raw material stage into a finished product, understanding how that works, and working with a team to bring that home. Did that for a couple years with Frito-Lay, and then moved into distribution, and cut my teeth in distribution, learning how you get products from point A to point B in a cost-effective way that meets the customer needs. And
Hmm.
then I spent time even learning how to lay out distribution centers, optimize space, reduce steps, and improve efficiency in the workplace, and did that for years. Until I moved into restaurant operations, where I took that distribution experience, brought it to a new industry, and
Hmm.
after doing a tremendous amount of optimization and cost savings and making things better, jumped into the world of procurement for a new challenge. And so that's where I've been for the last 10 years.
That's such a great portfolio, David. Like the different things you have done over the years. I'm sure you have so many different stories, but I would love to hear like a success story from your end, like about operational strategy and growth. Like how has that changed the way you think about this, over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think about, there's a lot of stories I have, but one that I think really encompasses a lot was, and I'll talk about the story, but first I want to talk about what I do, or what I found works in most situations. And what I've learned is that you have to figure out how to keep score in whatever business or operation you're running. So the benefit of keeping score is it takes you from that goal setting stage, that every company has goals and initiatives, and then helps you determine where you should put your focus. So,
Hmm.
what I do is I've learned that people always have to do tasks. There's always something that they're working on, but they have to link what they're doing to the bigger picture goals of the company. And that's where scorekeeping really comes in. If you can help people keep score, they learn to know if they're winning or if they're not. And if they're not, then they start to ask, what can I do to get better? As an
Uh-huh.
example, when I was in distribution with Darden, I took over distribution center operations, and they had a good operation. What they didn't have was scorecards, and they didn't have a lot of data to say, are we doing the best that we can? Where can we improve? And so I put together a scorecard that looked at areas like cost, quality, service, people, and growth. And then we determined metrics that we would track to say,
Hmm.
where are we at today? Where do we need to get to? Every team meeting that we had was focused on that scorecard, and we might dive into one particular area and have a brainstorming session and come up with activities to focus and improve. Over the course of a couple years, we ended up saving millions of dollars annually. We improved our service levels by double digits. We went from an area where we had multiple injuries in the warehouse every month to going a year and a half without a single injury. And we grew the business by 30%. That's the power of getting everyone on the same page and focused on KPIs and how that relates to the goals of the organization.
That's such a great term that you use, right? Scorecard. So I'm hearing it for the first time. I know we have KPIs and stuff like that, but we never did it like, keep a scorecard and keep everybody on the same page. That's a perfect example. That's why I love to hear these real world examples because we can actually implement them in our daily lives. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Now,
mean,
I was
yeah,
going
go
to say
ahead. Go ahead.
some companies call it a dashboard, and certainly there's so many
Mhm.
tools today with AI and big data that you can get
Yeah,
information so much easier and present in such a more interesting way. When I
yeah,
built the scorecard, there was a lot of hours and time put together and trying to cobble data, and we were
yeah,
using systems that had it, but then you'd have to dump it into Excel and make graphs manually. Now all that stuff is so easy to do. Any company that's not focused on that, they really need to take a second look at that, because it's very easy to do in today's environment.
yeah. Especially now with AI, right? So
Absolutely.
that kind of brings me to like one spot here, like now in terms of industrial distribution. If we talk about companies today, what is like the biggest operational blind spot that you frequently observe in these companies, that we're talking about, even with AI in place?
Yeah, there's a lot of areas. One thing I would say that I've seen is a lot of companies kind of get into a comfort zone with their long-term suppliers, and they may
Yeah.
not be willing to look at options. Perhaps salespeople call them up regularly and they say, "Well, I don't have time to meet with this person." But I always make a point to try to understand, where these, when salespeople approach you, what it is they're offering, do they understand my business? Do they have something different or interesting to talk about? And if that answer is yes, I'm happy to meet with them, because I think in the world of business, competition makes people better. And so I want to make sure that I'm looking and doing market research and understanding who's out there that I could learn from and maybe get better. Now, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, long-term strategic suppliers are core to any business being successful. And so you don't just want to be willy-nilly, but I think it's
Mhm.
important to listen to others, see what they have to say, and see if there's something you can learn and maybe move forward with. I think it's a mistake when people don't talk to others who are trying to approach them about cost saving objectives, ways to improve
Mhm.
service, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to my next point then. Like, when should a growing business actually should start thinking about scaling, especially to like offshore teams or outsourcing operation support that will support their business?
Yeah, good question. I think, outsourcing can be scary to some businesses, right?
Yeah.
And the reason being is that they sense that, hey, I'm giving up some level of comfort and control and perhaps even
Mhm.
taking on some risk, and that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But the reality is that every company has only limited resources, whether it's capital, time, people, you name it. So what
Yeah.
they really need to think about is, what I'm doing today, is that the best use of my resources available? Or would I be better off to outsource certain activities or processes to someone else, because that allows me to redeploy that resource into something else that helps me grow my business or improve my customer satisfaction or improve quality or whatever that is. That's how they need to think about that.
Yeah, definitely. So you actually brought a good point that companies today are scared to kind of, take that step. So is there like a trick or up your sleeve that you would like to present to companies out there to actually think about outsourcing, or even like, helping them understand what kind of services should be outsourced that will help them?
Sure. I think it comes down to risk versus reward.
Hmm.
We talked a little bit about, that freeing up resources. Um, what I think about is like, how do I start small and confirm this makes sense? So if I'm a vertically integrated manufacturer, I'm not just going to go out and outsource 30% of my operation, but I might
Exactly.
be able to look and see, is there a process I'm doing today that someone else is doing better? Because I'm not an expert at this. I've done it this way because that's how I started out. But a
Hmm.
lot of times, if you don't have scale in a process, there's people out there that do, and they're not competitors to yours. So that's why I say, can we look at those processes where I don't have scale, where I don't have really great expertise at, and talk to
Hmm.
suppliers that do that? So I start small. I try to understand, what they do, how they do it. I might say, okay, let me talk to some of your clients. Have they been through something like this? How did they get started? So I think those client referrals and testimonials are very important for
Yeah.
people if you're going to consider doing some type of outsourcing work. I talk manufacturing. It could be other business processes. It could be things like HR, accounting, or other
Hmm.
things. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you outsource the whole department. Maybe it's just those activities that you're not particularly good at or don't really add value to your business.
Yeah, and that kind of answers my next question as well. Like, what kind of task and role should, like, you start off with, and then generally do in terms of like housekeeping, right? That's what it's called. So, do you have a checklist of your own that you keep when you are, reaching out to companies to understand exactly what their limitations are in terms of outsourcing, or even like generally just long-term growth with cost-cutting measures, like? Do you have anything in that?
I don't know if I have a checklist per se. I do have, like, how I think about it is, where do they add value that I don't? Where am I tying up resources? And it might not be multiple people for an entire day. It might be, hey, I have someone in accounting that does this for a certain period of time, and that pulls them away from other activities. Or maybe I'll take one that's very common, which is talent acquisition, especially in a small to medium
Mhm.
company.
Yeah,
If I have an HR director or head of HR, or maybe a couple people, there's a lot of things that are very important for them to focus on. And
yeah,
especially if my turnover isn't very high, which if you've got a great culture, your turnover should be low.
yeah,
In most places I work, that's the case.
yeah.
But when something happens or you need to add a headcount, do you really want to take that person's focus away from building culture, team development, coaching, and put them on talent acquisition when maybe
Mhm.
that's not their strong suit? There's tons of great people out there that do this for a living. You can make relationships and build relationships with companies that really understand your business and culture. And that's just a great opportunity to outsource something that you don't do on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah. David, it's the way you kind of put things in a perspective that's perfect for what we're looking for. I mean, in terms of like mindset for today's leaders, right? What kind of things they should adopt, right, to genuinely support the long-term growth and see your company grow in today's world, especially in supply chain and operations.
Yeah, I think the mindset, you need to be curious, you need to be open-minded. You need to understand what your goals are. So, if your goals aren't to really grow, there's some companies that are happy just to not grow very much. There's others that are more aggressive, but you have to
Mhm.
start with what are the organization's goals, then a recognition of what you do well, and then a recognition of how can you think differently about your business. And
Mhm.
oftentimes you aren't making these decisions in a vacuum. You're talking with other business leaders. You're talking, with mentors. You're talking with maybe even suppliers. A lot of times those supplier conversations lead somewhere that's really interesting, makes me think different about the business. But it all starts with being curious and understand what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. That's perfect. And finally, David, before we end this podcast, what is your advice that you would love to give to future leaders and business people that are looking to advance in this field and in this career?
My advice, again, I'll go back to being curious.
Uh,
Business changes. I'm a pretty competitive person and I like to win. So,
uh,
um, in any role that I've had, there's always this learning curve, and that learning curve could be a few months, it could be half a year, whatever that is. But
yeah.
once you learn about the role, how to attack it, what your tools are, who the important people are, that's where it gets really fun and exciting, and you can start making improvements and seeing differences. And then what's really important, I think, and sometimes people get a little humble about their successes and what they achieve.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
important to learn how to keep people informed about what you're doing, what you're working on, and the successes you have. Because if you're not doing that effectively or at all,
Hmm.
people may not realize the impact you're having. So learn to tout your success in a humble way. Learn to manage up through the organization is a very important skill set for young people to have. And the
Yeah.
other thing is, again, be curious, find mentors, find people who've done it before, and ask them what works. 9 times out of 10, people they like talking about their background. They like talking about their successes. And so, 9 times out of 10, if you approach them in the right way, they're going to be more than happy to share their experience.
Yeah, and David, that's what this podcast is about, is to kind of find leaders like you to give us this advice that we're looking for, especially people from our generation. But this conversation has been so insightful and packed with actionable advice. I would say, what you need to do, scorecards, be curious, be upfront about what you're doing. So thank you so much for giving us your time today and talking about this. And yeah, any last thoughts that you
No,
would like to share?
I'd say this is a lot of fun. I'm very happy to talk through my experience or to problem solve, ideate. So if we want to do another session again, that's great. If someone wants to reach out to me after they see this podcast, I'd be happy to chat. That's awesome.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, David, and we'll stay connected. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Cynthia. Take care.